Make America beautiful.
Make America beautiful again. That's a good slogan. When we run for president, that can be
Make
our
America
slogan.
beautiful again.
Yeah, and we'll change the flag
Make
to
America
pink,
pink
white.
again. Well, that was never pink.
But it can be.
Make America pink.
Make America pink forever.
I'm for it. This is my first time not wearing pink, but I did put on pink socks for the podcast. Pink.
Footsie, stop playing footsies with me.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be the podcast if we weren't wearing socks.
Fun socks. I have like
Fun socks.
polar bear shiny socks.
With a crown.
With a crown. Because we're princesses. We're princesses of God.
Princesses of Christ.
Princesses. We're Jesus' little princesses.
We're anointed. Or favored.
We are
Like
favored.
Esther.
Like Esther. Yeah, you're right.
There we go.
Little Esthers.
All right.
Well,
We're back. Episode 3. We did it, y'all. We did it. Like, not just us, but y'all too. Like, we did it. We
Yeah.
made it to episode 3.
yay.
We're excited. I think I'm a little nervous. The past 2 episodes, we've dove completely into
The word.
the word. And this is the first episode where we're taking the word and we are applying it to another space. So this episode in particular, we are applying what Jesus says to politics.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be really fun.
We love talking about this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people do too. They just don't outwardly say it.
Yeah. And this is literally what bonded us. This is how we even got to know each other, because I was on a political tangent on my Instagram stories and Lex wrote. And like, that's how this all got rolling. So this is like kind of our thing.
It's our space and it's our thing. And I think that we are a little nervous to step into it just because I feel like politics has a taboo on it. But I want to shake that up.
Yeah.
Like,
Because
we're redefining a lot of things at this podcast, and I think that we can redefine what politics means as a Christian. Lauren had a really good point, because I had some struggles the last couple weeks.
I'm like, did
kinda
I have a good point?
You did. Yeah, you did have a good point, and that Christians should be involved in politics.
Yeah.
I think that some of us can struggle to wonder if there's even a point, because ultimately, we are citizens of heaven, and the ultimate place that we strive and hope to be is heaven. But while we are here,
We need to be
we need to be active.
Yes.
And in the policies that are passed in this country, and the way that happens is by going out and voting, but also being educated and understanding what's really going on. A lot of people are complacent in that.
Yes.
And that leads to misinformation, and that leads to inaction, and then that leads to people like the last administration being voted in, and then that leads to
things being passed, the don't align.
right.
And I don't even know what election this was that my mom got involved with this organization, My Faith Votes. And my mom just gets really passionate about Christians voting. And the lack of Christian voters in not this election, the election prior. So that was what, the 2020 election. The lack of Christian voters, because there are enough Christians in America to have a major say in politics. But and I don't say we, because not all of us, but some Christians, like you said, and ultimately, Jesus, God is King. He is who we live for. But while we're on earth, we can have a say in things that are happening. And
That affects us. That truly affects
it
us.
does. And our children and the trajectory of our lives. And some Christians, though, go with that idea, well, I don't
Leave
care
it
who's
up to
president.
God. Yeah, like leave it up to God.
God
It's
will
all
take
part
care
his
of
plan,
it.
which it is part of his plan. But
But we have free will for a reason.
We have free will, and if we are given that freedom, like, why not take advantage of it? You know what I mean? Like, why would we willingly live in circumstances that don't align with our beliefs when we have the
Exactly.
ability to vote and vote for things that do?
Yeah.
Why
And
would we do that to ourselves?
when people just kind of, they're like, neither of the candidates are good. I'm just going to
Sit this one out.
turn away, look away. But like looking away isn't going to fix it. And so you have to be active in finding the candidate that best aligns with Christian values.
Yeah.
Because nobody is perfect. Everyone is a sinner. And finding just the best candidate that aligns most is sometimes the only option.
And it's not even like, I'd like to like remind people that you're not just voting for one person, you're voting for his administration,
Yes.
and you're also voting for like Congress. You're voting for people that represent your state and your community. You're representing,
And that's
or
what really
you're-
affects you too.
yeah, like if you're okay, put the president aside, right? Let's talk about who your representative is. Let's talk about who your senator is for your state. We are their constituents here on earth, and they represent us. And even local government, like not even on the national stage. Let's look at state government. Let's look at community government, like who we elect as education board members and people within our community who make decisions here around us,
Things that really affect our day-to-day.
closest to us. Yeah, yeah. Like it's not just politics isn't just the federal level. Politics is people in your town, people in your
Down to the local.
yeah.
I was listening to a podcast and it struck such a chord with me that as Christians, we have sort of forgotten how to celebrate or become a little bit afraid of celebrating because we have taken humility almost to an extreme where we are so nervous of upsetting someone, hurting someone who doesn't agree with us, that we cower back and we're like just like, okay, I'm excited about it, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And I know for me, election day this year, I was really excited. I was so excited. And I didn't post until like 7 p.m.
When you're
because-
like, this election we got in the
like
bag.
everything I saw, I was like. I was overwhelmed with joy all day. Like it just felt like, oh my goodness, yes, like
It's
we
happening.
did this. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many prayer chains going on. Like, I truly believe like Christians showed up this
we
year.
stepped up.
Like
yeah.
we did it. And I do personally believe like we have set America up for a lot of change that's going to be really good for the Christian community and bringing Christian values back to America. So I felt so excited, but I was so afraid of upsetting people that I didn't post anything. And I kind of just like cowered back. And then I was like, no, like I'm allowed to be happy. And just how people were allowed to be sad. And anyone in my life who I saw who posted something that was upset, I simply messaged them and I wrote, I love you with a period. Like, because just because we're different and
very nice
you're
of you.
sad today and I'm happy today, I'm not gloating. I still love you. I want you to know that this isn't divisive for me. Like, I still love you. But that did allow me to hold back for most of the day. And then finally I was just like, no, I'm going to celebrate. And I think Christians need to learn to rejoice.
Rejoice in the truth.
Yes. And there are, and Lex is about to share some, there are some things that no matter how controversial President Donald Trump is, there are things that he's already done within his first 30 days in office that we can all rejoice in as Christians, that we can all rejoice in as people.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just some things that he's done that we should rejoice and we should be excited. And there are even things in his last term that he did that we should rejoice in. Defunding Planned Parenthood. As Christians, we should be rejoicing. It's an amazing
Because every
thing.
life is precious. And yeah, we'll definitely
There will be a time when we talk about that.
Right, yeah, in detail.
Yes.
So in Trump's first 30 days, day one, he did a lot of things
He's
day
done
one.
so much.
Did a lot of things day one, but we wanted to focus on things that weren't like super controversial. So I just picked a few things. Day one, executive order restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship. This is vital.
It's huge.
It's vital for Christians, and it's vital for anyone to practice their faith. I'm reminded of recently there were 70 Christians in Africa who were murdered in a church, like brutally murdered, and there's no outrage about it. I mean, the Bible does say that we will be persecuted, and there were disciples and apostles who were murdered. I think that we as Americans have become so complacent with our freedoms, and
We don't realize,
we don't realize how blessed we are.
how easily they could be taken away.
Right,
And how so many people don't have them.
right. Like we are so much in a bubble of freedom and this cushy lifestyle that we have that we fail to see that around the world there are Christians
Who
who
aren't.
who face death every day just for being a Christian.
Right? Who can't own a Bible.
Right. Who have to hide and worship God in like hiding. Like people are coming after them. It's sad. It's like I could never imagine a life like that. But I honor those people, and I look up to them because how great of faith do they have to have, you know? And on top of that, a lot of these places are third world countries. So
Right.
they don't live in the comforts that we do.
And you think of and to imagine putting yourself into a position like that, because you have to think, even the disciples who were learning from Jesus in person, were with him every day, saw him performing miracles, many of them still denied him.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think and challenge yourself and ask yourself, do I have that kind of faith? And I like to think I do, but that's a big thought. Like,
not
do
to
I
be-
have that kind of faith?
Yeah, like not to be like dramatic or vulgar, but like if someone like was threatening you with death and said, "Are you a Christian?" What would you say? You know?
Yeah.
Like-
And I truly would like to, it's like,
You want to think that you would say, "Yes, I am a Christian. Yes, I believe in God and stand firm and stand true and believe that God ordained your moment then, or like he would redeem you and take you out of that situation." But like
I think we don't have to think about it often, because we do
we're
live,
not faced with that.
I almost want to call it a luxury. Like, we have the luxury
Oh,
of not
yeah.
having to think of that.
It's definitely a
What
luxury.
we think of is just like, we can play our worship music in the car. We can go to church on Sunday. We can have a cross on the back of our car.
We can read our Bibles in public.
Like, all of those little things, those are luxuries that we have. And so we're not thinking of that question.
Right.
So it's a good move.
That's a big win.
Big win.
Especially
Rejoice.
rejoice in that. And it's another big thing that he's enduring federal censorship, because a lot of times people think that our American government would never come after us as individuals, but that is so far from the truth because we saw it happen in the last administration. We'll get into details about that in a later episode.
Just a little bit of Lex suddenly comes out. A little bit of her like impassioned. But we will get into it later.
I had to catch myself.
Let me breathe.
So the second one is like, it's very, I think that there is a beauty to architecture. And
She was almost going to take it out, and I was like, no, we all should rejoice in that.
yeah, there's like, when you think of Europe and all these old beautiful buildings and like Greek and Roman architecture and like the styles that they bring and Baroque, all these beautiful churches. Um, Day one, Donald Trump signed an executive order promoting beautiful federal civil architecture. So, like federal buildings will have more of an aesthetic to it. Who doesn't want that?
I know.
I don't want to sit
I don't think
here.
anyone can complain about that.
Right. So the day after second day in office, President Trump signed an executive order ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. The Bible does talk about like working hard and like you aren't just given stuff freely. I think it's important to recognize where you can improve. And like also, why are we lying to people saying that they deserve something when like maybe you don't, you know? I don't know. I could have worded that a little bit better,
no, but it's the idea that, and it's different but the same, but the idea of like the participation trophies.
yeah,
Like
sorry.
we've become a culture of participation trophies, and I think we need to move back from that.
Sure.
Because
Well, just don't lie to people
yeah, and it sets you up
for
for failure. It ultimately sets you up for failure.
Yes. Moving on to the next month, going into February, February 6th and 7th, President Trump eradicated anti-Christian bias and he established the White House Faith Office. That is incredible, seeing a president really bring in faith to the White House.
It's big.
It's huge.
These are
It's a
big wins.
big win for Christians, and we should absolutely be celebrating this. And lastly, on the 13th of February, President Trump established the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission, and we're excited about that.
We are excited about that. And one of our
Your body is a temple, and it houses the Holy Spirit. And you want to make sure that your body is in the best shape possible and in the best health possible. What you eat,
what you put on your skin,
what you put on your skin, products and ingredients that don't belong there.
that are banned in other countries,
right, but like,
but we're using them.
yeah,
Or when we're literally making things here and exporting them to other countries, and they're completely different ingredients than the things that we are making for our own country. That
it's insightful because a lot of times like we don't know what we're putting in or on our bodies, and I'm glad that there are people in this country like RFK Jr. who is fighting for that, and not just for us but for our children.
Because we've become so trusting in the government. For many years, people became so trusting in the government that, oh, it's FDA approved. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Because the government would never give me anything bad for me.
guys, that's just a label.
Like,
That's a label.
never. The government would
Yeah.
never suggest that I put anything bad into my body.
Well, guess what? The devil is a
It's
liar.
true. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Lex's karaoke moment.
I told you guys these hairbrushes were going to bring out karaoke.
They bring out the inspiration to sing.
So,
So-
yeah, go ahead.
That kind of covers our first 30 days. And those are just things that we want to remind everyone and unite everyone before we dive into some of the more controversial topics. At least the first one is a little more controversial, but we wanted to look at things that we can all agree are good, and we should all be able to agree on those.
Yeah.
But before we get into the actual topics, we did want to touch on Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, and we do know that he is a controversial leader, and people have differing opinions on him, and the mean tweets and adultery and different aspects of his past that people look at and think, well, how could you be a Christian and vote for him? And for one, we are all sinners, and yes, he is a sinner, so am I.
So am I.
All of
And
us.
so are you.
Yeah, and it's
Like
it's
we all are.
true. None of us are
Yeah.
perfect. No one other than Jesus Christ. Like no one else who has walked this earth,
It's perfect.
it has lived a sinless life.
Right.
And what we found is God uses imperfect people for really big missions. God appoints imperfect leaders, and we saw this time and time again in the Bible. We look at the biggest one we were looking at was King David, who is Jesus's bloodline,
Yeah.
brings brings us the Messiah through his bloodline, but was an adulterer, was a murderer, and yet God still used him
Yeah.
to carry out a huge plan. God still used him. We have the Samaritan woman, who we mentioned last time, the woman at the well who was promiscuous. We had Noah, who was a drunk, Jacob, who was a cheater, David, like we said, was a murderer, Peter ends up denying Christ, Paul, a Pharisee, persecuted Christians before becoming one of the greatest heroes of the faith. So God chooses these people who are so flawed, and he knows that their sins, and he knows their sin nature, but he chooses them for these big plans,
Yeah.
and to essentially raise them up to be heroes of the faith. And that kind of brings us into the next part of like, we don't know Donald Trump's current relationship with Jesus. We don't know his current position, where his heart is.
But what we do know is I think that after the two assassination attempts on his life, on Inauguration Day, he did reference that in his speech. I don't know if it was the actual inaugural address.
It was.
Okay.
Yes.
Where he acknowledged the fact that like it made him reevaluate his relationship with God. And even that heart posture turn is impactful, you know?
It is.
It's going to allow, and I think it's evident,
It is so evident. I mean, my mom and I were just
allows
talking about that.
him to be open to all these things like eradicating anti-Christian bias, establishing the White House Faith Office. I don't know if you want to get into it now, but like electing, like
Yes.
1/3 of his cabinet are Christians.
Yeah. 1/3 of his cabinet that he nominated. And also, just if you watch clips of him recently, his demeanor is calmer.
Yeah.
He's slower to snap back.
I mean, he's still sassy. He's still
He
President
is.
Trump. Like, he's still Donald Trump.
He still is who he is, but I feel like
He's totally toned it down.
his demeanor is just calmer. And I think things like that come with a relationship with God. And not to say that he's fully in the faith, but
Sure.
when you start seeing those shifts in people, there's something going on.
Yeah.
Something is being stirred up in his heart.
There is something different about him this time around. Again, we're not saying he's perfect.
No, but you can just see a little.
And we should celebrate that.
Yeah,
We should be
you can
glad.
see this little shift in his tone, and something that I took from the inaugural address that I think shows that despite his imperfections, we can see wherever he is on his journey with God, he is a friend of the church. And what Lex had pointed out, some of the things he's done, it makes very clear. But this statement alone, I feel like, solidifies that. He said, "We will not forget our country, we will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God." And I think that says everything, that he put God in that sentence, that speech, and the way he said it. Like, our country, our Constitution, our God. And that is definitely something that we should be rejoicing, because I feel like the past 4 years before that, we have seen God being pulled out
Yes.
and just kind of
And
taken,
discarded.
yes, taken away from us. And it's like, now we're seeing God being brought back in. And that is exciting.
It's very exciting because like American values are based. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you say. and to dispute this, like America was founded on Judeo-Christian values.
Yes.
And we should celebrate when our leaders, despite who they are and where their faith lies, we should celebrate when they advocate and embrace these values, as it honors God. And I was going to read a couple of Bible verses that kind of
Yes.
support that. In Psalm 33:12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he chose for his inheritance. So when a nation recognizes and honors God, we position ourselves to receive God's blessings. And God's faithfulness often leads to divine favor and guidance. I think we're seeing that in a revival across the nation. In the book of Ezra, 1 through 4, King Cyrus of Persia was moved by God to allow the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. A heart posture change, allowing King Cyrus of Persia was not a man of God. He was not a Hebrew. Yet he had a softer heart to allow God's people honor him. And however you view Donald Trump, if you view him as an evil man, if you view him as someone who advocates for the faith, his heart is softening, and that's going to allow for us Christians to be able to live out our faith in government, in our everyday lives. And then lastly, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. And I think that we are starting to see that. We are on a journey, and it's honestly, every day is a win for me, in my opinion. Every day, I mean, we'll get into the best way to express these things and the best way to celebrate these things, because there is a right and a wrong way. But I am so empowered seeing the things that are coming out of the White House in this administration, and our leaders stepping out in their faith and being so bold about it. It's really encouraging to see.
It is. I think going back to that first verse, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he chose for his inheritance. And when a nation recognizes and honors God, you're allowing those blessings in. And I feel like literally that quote from that address, that is recognizing God. That is honoring God. And so we are allowing his blessings back into this country. And I feel like this was a turning point, because it was a moment where people stepped up, people were in prayer, people showed up to vote. And God saw it. He was like, okay, I'm gonna turn this around for you guys.
Because compared to what we could have had.
He was watching it all. He sees it all. And our world has turned away from him so much, and there are so many wicked ways, essentially. And he could have just said, okay, y'all are doing what you're doing. I feel like he saw so many people turning to him during this last
out of the holy
election. And so he allowed us that. He allowed us
he showed us mercy. He really did show us mercy, because I mean, I have to be honest, if the other candidate won, the trajectory of this nation was going to be destruction.
Things would be looking different. I mean, those things that we were reading off, I don't think would be.
Oh no,
it would not have happened.
We'd be closer to having our rights as Christians taken away from us.
Because there was a lack of respect for God.
What did she say in one of her rallies?
Oh my gosh, you guys, I remember posting about this. Oh my goodness, I was so outraged. I remember posting this video. But
let me just start out with this. God is not mocked.
No.
He's not.
No. And she essentially, y'all probably remember this video. People were saying in the audience,
Jesus is Lord.
Jesus is Lord. And she was like, oh, I think you're at the wrong rally. I think that's true at every rally.
Gay.
I think that's true wherever you are. So now we are going to get into our He Said That portion.
Yes.
And through He Said That this week, we are going to look at the topics of immigration and gender. And we are going to look at those topics through biblical truths,
Yep.
through some verses, kind of breaking down both of these topics. They are both hot topics right now. And immigration in particular has been very,
very polarizing.
and it's tough. I mean, even when I was researching it, and I think Lex you've wrestled these feelings already. And I was confident in my stance, but as I was researching, I was going, ooh,
Yeah.
it's a hard one. It's really hard because we do want to lead with compassion, but there's so much more to it. And we're about to dive into that. And I think just to kind of lay foundation, something that struck me is the Bible is a book of migrants. I mean, we see so many people in the Bible as essentially immigrants. I mean, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus fleeing into Egypt, Abraham going, to the promised land. Like, so many people
going from one nation to another.
Yeah, like that is a lot of the stories of the Bible. Moses fleeing Egypt, Ruth moving to Israel when her mother-in-law returned. I said her mother-in-law, I could have just said Naomi. You just see it time and time again. And so we are called to love, and to love as God loves.
Absolutely.
That kind of brings us to some of our verses.
Yeah, there's more than a few Bible verses that support this. And I've found that like throughout both of our individual studies, the same message is being taught or is being expressed in Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus. And in Exodus, it says, "You shall not oppress a resident alien. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt." Deuteronomy 10:19. "And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt." Leviticus 19:33-34. "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." And I think that message is repeatedly said because there's
emphasis.
There's emphasis on it, and that's throughout the whole Bible. There's tons of messages that are consistently repeated, and it is for emphasis. Numbers, like the amount of times things are repeated, is a big thing, and I think that we would be fools to not recognize this. And I think that ultimately the heart of that message is like, have compassion for people, even if they were not born here and regardless of their status. We are all humans, and we're all made in the image of God. Despite our cultural differences, despite our religious differences, we are called to love people.
We're all children of God.
We're all children of God. And heaven is not going to have borders.
No.
Heaven is going to be a kingdom of all of God's children. And it's going to look so different. And like there's so many things
there'll
that
be
we
people
could
from
talk
every
about.
nation.
Every
and,
single nation.
Every language. And we will all be together in heaven. I believe we'll all understand each other, and
yes, well, the book of Acts
live
says
together.
Like, this message is for you and your children and for all that are far off, meaning like God's love and God's grace, and it's for every single person on this earth. So any prejudices that people have for migrants of different countries coming into our nation, you have to dispel that, or you're not acting according to God's will and His word. So,
and really, what we can control is how we treat people, and to love as God does. And just then, I just got this memory, because we were talking about how in heaven there will be people from every nation and every tongue and every tribe. And I think back to, I did a mission trip in Bulgaria, and we were transforming part of the orphanage into little apartments for Ukrainian refugees. And the most beautiful moment, our final night in Bulgaria, we were outside, and you had a group of 12 missionaries from Texas You had all of these. Essentially, the orphanage was an orphanage for boys who had outaged the
Like
orphanage
the system.
system, but they had some type of disability where they
Oh,
couldn't like
sure.
live on their own or really work on their own. So they would garden and they would do housework and they would do all those kinds of things. And so they were helping us the whole time, like transforming these rooms into apartments. And
Oh, sweet.
that final night, the boys from this orphanage who were like between 18 and in their 20s, young 20s, they were building a playground with the men on our team for the small children from Ukraine. And I have this video where I'm just like panning and it's like sunset and you see like the Bulgarian orphans playing with the Ukrainian kids and like throwing frisbees, and then just like you see the like our team talking with some talking with the boys, all everyone working on the playground, and it's like three different languages, three different countries, but all just like together. And
Yeah.
it was so beautiful and magic, and I was like, this is literally a little glimpse of what heaven will be like. This is a little glimpse of what heaven will look like. There's no like nothing that was separating or dividing us. Like it was just this beautiful, beautiful thing. And I was like, this is it. Like this is what heaven's like. This is what it's
Yeah.
really all about.
Oh,
And
that's really special.
it was
Gosh.
amazing. And that just came to me randomly. But
I'm glad you
um,
shared that.
that call to care for strangers, and
Yeah.
when we love others, we're loving God.
I think that, like, I'll say, like, our side of the issue. I hate saying our side, their side. I don't like that words of division, but, like, people on this side of the immigration issue, I pray that we do a better job of, like, expressing this, and expressing why, like, legal immigration is the right way to go about this. Because right now, what I'm seeing from a lot of, like, people who proclaim to be Christians, is some of the most hateful things I've ever seen. And like you wonder why people look at Christians and are like, you guys are full of bull honky. Like what you're saying is not what you're preaching. Like and what you're doing is not indicative of that. And
Of the
I
values.
and I think that we as Christians, but also as people of the conservative ideology, can do a better job of expressing this. At the same time, though, I think that we've already said that the last administration did a really terrible job of lying to people. When you open up a secure border, because don't let the media lie to you, our border was secure in 2020
Yeah.
before Joe Biden took office.
And
And
we got the numbers, y'all.
yeah, like numbers don't lie, but the media does. So I suggest that people do a little bit of their own research.
Well, when you just completely open up a border, chaos will ensue.
Yeah,
I
like
mean, you were opening yourself up to it. We took a peek. I printed out this chart. It is from the White House website. This talks about the crime numbers from illegal immigrants. And you guys, when you see the jump from 2020 to 2021, it's a jump that makes zero sense. It's a jump that is so outrageously large that it really makes you say, okay, something much bigger is going on here. It makes me very much feel inclined to say, okay, the enemy is at work. Like the devil is utilizing open borders to further a much larger agenda. And all of this, we have to realize, you guys, this is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is not conservatives versus liberals. This is a battle of good versus evil at the end of the day. And so just looking at these numbers, the number for illegal drug possession and trafficking in 2020 was 386 convictions. The number in 2021 was 2,139. Assault, battery, domestic violence, 2020 is 208 convictions, 2021 1,178 convictions.
All of these like conviction types, burglary, robbery, larceny, theft, fraud, homicide, manslaughter, although those numbers are lower, they still increased by
It's like
60%.
yeah, it's not even the numbers, it's the increase
It's the
percentage.
uptick.
It's like, wait, what? I mean, just like things, if you look at almost anything, it's like, upward progression or like,
Actually,
this is just like
from 2017, Trump took office in early 2017. It started high and then it goes down in the middle of Trump's administration, his first go around, like to the double digits, and then you see the numbers skyrocket like 10 times more than what they were when
truly,
Obama was in office.
those are the numbers we're seeing, you guys. Even driving under the influence went from 364 convictions in 2020 to 1,629 in 2021. I mean, these are just.
And I want to be clear, like when we say these crimes were committed by illegal immigrants, we're not talking about the women and the children. We're talking about men and sometimes women who are coming from countries where they are being dispelled of. Guys, you have to understand that like there are bad actors at play in this world. And just like Lauren said, the devil is working.
The devil's working.
He is behind all of this.
He's going to use whatever he can.
Whatever he can. And I think it's really, really important to understand that there are bad actors at play in the world, and there are people who look at America and who want to destroy it.
Like when you open your borders, and we literally just went through those numbers to show you exactly what happens when you do that. Chaos. Complete chaos.
Well, and like if you can't like properly vet people, and people are always like, we're vetting people. That person was vetted. It's like, are you sure?
Well, there's process, and there are processes in place for a reason.
Right.
For legal entry into a country.
Well, and another thing is like a lot of the countries that some of these illegal immigrants were coming from, those countries don't have records for us to vet them with. So if those countries don't have records that we can do a background check on them for, how do we know what they're doing?
What are we looking at?
What are we looking at? How do we know what they did in their own country? Why are they coming to ours?
And then why are they not wanting them back?
And why are these countries not wanting them back?
Because we have been seeing that.
And again, we are not talking about innocent people. We are not talking about women and young children. We're talking about military-aged men who are crossing the border or were crossing the border with malintent.
I do want to speak on something that Dr. Robert Jeffries of Dallas Baptist said. He did say the Bible. This is a direct quote. The Bible teaches that God created the institution of government to protect its citizens. Christians have a duty to obey the laws government establishes, which would include immigration laws. And Dr. Jeffries pulled that from Paul, and Paul explaining the purpose of government authorities and that it is their purpose to protect the good and to punish the evil. And also saying that Christians should obey the government because of that very reason, right? So if we are told from the Bible to obey the law, ultimately, if you are coming into a country illegally, it is illegal. I think the key here is looking at legal versus illegal, because when you use the term criminal aliens, which is what was used on the White House website, it's criminal. It's a crime. What you're doing is a crime. And not to say that there are not reasons that people would flee and want to come to this country. And it is our ultimate hope that people who are seeking refuge
and asylum, that
they can find that and that we can have systems set up. And is it perfect? Probably not.
Well, it's not. It isn't.
It's not.
And it does require an overhaul. I really do think that an immigration law requires, like, there have to be
systems in place for those people.
Yeah, and I would even go so far as to say, like, if you came to this country illegally and if you don't have a criminal record, aside from the fact that you entered the country illegally, I personally think that like if you are contributing to society and you are willing to assimilate to American culture to an extent, like, and when I say that I mean like accept American values like we discussed earlier in the episode, there should be some sort of system that allows you to get put on the right track to citizenship. I think if we're going to be compassionate, and to kind of tone down, I know I got a little heated in that last discussion, but like if that's a potential way that we could be compassionate. We, instead of like totally ignoring the fact that people are coming to our country to seek asylum, to seek refuge, to seek better opportunities, maybe don't punish the people who were told a lie.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I do think too, and there was, when I was kind of researching for this episode, I did see at one point on one website, and I don't think it's not anything that is currently into play, but you know, if there could be a system where people can essentially like retroactively contribute as far as taxes go, or as far as,
Yeah.
you know, because I think that's something that when you see people who are financially struggling, who are citizens, and they're financially struggling, yet they're, you know, so much of our income goes to our taxes. And then you have people who are working, they're not paying taxes, they're not contributing, but they're reaping the benefits of being here. And that's where things get a little bit hard, because I mean, I have firsthand experience seeing people I love very much so struggling.
Yes, me too.
And you see that and it's like, it doesn't sit well. It doesn't sit well, and it doesn't seem right. And there are so many people who went through so much to come here legally.
Yes,
who went through all the right channels. Like,
did.
It's a long process. It's not an easy process. And they did it the right way. And so when you look at it that way, it makes it more difficult.
It does, and it's a reality that plays into the sensitive nature of this topic, right? Because that's such a good point, and I think that really plays into, we talked about this in episode 1, J.D. Vance referencing the Ordo Amoris. That's exactly what he's talking about, is to neglect those nearest to us under the pretext of loving more broadly and generously is not really to exercise love. I mean, like, yes, I believe that we are to care for those who are in need, who come to our country and have nothing. But why are we not first taking care of our own? And
there are so many people in America suffering.
Yeah. Who were born here and who are American citizens, or who came here legally and worked very, very hard and spent a lot of money and time, because the legal immigration process takes time. A lot of people will say that like illegal immigration is compassionate, but I have never understood that, because when you come illegally, you already have one mark against you, crossing the border illegally. And then you have to think about, like, you have a limit. There is a ceiling to your success. The sky is not the limit for you.
That's true.
I feel like you're going to be in a perpetual cycle of poverty. You're never going to be able to accomplish or reach for the American dream if, like, you are already here with one strike against you. What kind of life is that? And not only that, like, when you get deported, like, there's a ban on you. You're not allowed to come back.
Right.
Either ever or for a very long time. So do you really want to risk that? And then, like, this is one thing that I really, really find hard to understand with policies on the left, is like this dependency on the federal government. If you come here illegally, you are more likely to be dependent on the federal government that you don't pay into.
Which doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, but like, what? you're not coming here to achieve the American dream. The American dream is working hard. The American dream is making sacrifices. It's working all night to achieve your goals. And I just, that's not an American value. And I don't think that like getting free stuff is
Is the American dream.
is the American dream. Like, the federal government can only do so much for you. And honestly, they're holding you hostage. The more you rely on the federal government, the less free you are. So, and people, you can come for me all you want. I just know that to be a fact. I have lived amongst impoverished people. I have lived in communities that is rampant with people who unfortunately have to rely on federal government and state governments. Like, that's not a way to live. I'm sorry. Like, and they do it on purpose. They do it to keep you in that cycle of poverty so that you're continuing to rely on them for a vote.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best not to be harsh, but
No,
that is
but
the truth.
and I think left side politicians prey on that.
They do prey on
They
that.
very much so
But
prey
also
on
the
that.
Bible preaches about financial freedom and like having the ability to have control of your home and you know what you contribute to the church and providing for your family, and that goes into the family unit. And man, I'm kind of going on to a tangent, but like
Tangent away.
what kind of life are you living when you're here illegally and like you are just that dependent that you can't ever break that ceiling? We want you to come here and we want you to experience the beauty that is the American dream. I just, I fail to see how that's loving, and I fail to see how that's compassionate whenever we're forcing people to stay in a cycle of poverty
Dependence.
and dependence.
Yeah.
On the federal government at that, when they're lying to you. Sorry guys.
No, but
I hate to be so like gung ho, but
You should be so gung ho.
that's just a truth. And like, I wish people would be able to like look outside of their own bubble and understand that it's not all good.
Yep. So Romans 13, obey the government, for God is the one who has put it there. There is no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So those who refuse to obey the laws of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow. And that is Romans 13, 1 through 2. And like we said, it really just kind of highlights, you guys, we are not saying we are against immigrants. It is how you do it.
Yeah.
And it is the fact that if you are coming here illegally, you are not obeying the law, you are not obeying the government, and essentially you're not obeying God, because he does call you to obey the government.
Yes.
He allows people to be elected. He has overall power. We know that as Christians.
Yeah.
So if he allows someone to be elected and that person is making a law, God is telling you, obey that law.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty clear right there.
And I think that that verse encourages us to have a respect for the legal process, maintaining order within a community, and that there is wisdom in living in peace and cooperation with established laws.
It allows for peace for, I think, everyone in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because like I again, we don't dislike immigrants.
no,
We want people to come here. I am a first generation American. My dad's wife is an immigrant. I like that's what makes this country beautiful is it's a melting pot. Mm-hmm. And we have so many different cultures and languages, and it truly makes this country great. But don't limit yourself when you don't have to.
it's hard, y'all.
Yeah.
But God establishes nations and borders.
Mm-hmm.
And Deuteronomy 32:8 says, the Most High assigned nations their lands. He determined where people should live. He assigned to each nation a heavenly being. And this takes you back to the fact that a large portion of the book of Joshua in the Bible is completely devoted to the very detailed description of territorial boundaries, essentially borders, and for the 12 tribes. So they enter into the land of Canaan, they enter into the promised land, and God is very detailed. And I remember I mentioned the chronological Bible because I remember reading this portion going, do I really need to know like to the east of the river and the, like, do I really need to
Down
know
south,
these details?
yeah.
But God was very detailed with these boundaries, with these borders. It wasn't like they entered into the land of Canaan and it was a free for all and like go where you want to go. No, like God was intentional and detailed with the borders and the boundaries for the 12 tribes and where they would settle and where they would be.
Yeah.
And so even in the Bible, there were borders and they were placed there for a reason. And I keep going back to that word chaos because I do think that without boundaries, without borders, it is chaos.
It is chaos.
I do think the mainstream media is evil.
Yeah.
And they know that they're going to get you. They know how to pull at your heartstrings. But please remember the numbers. Please remember that, like, it's not just families being, like, broken up. That's not, like, and not to say that that hasn't happened in situations.
Yeah, we do acknowledge that it happens and it has happened and it is very sad. But
there are also people who have committed
horrendous crimes.
And so they're being strategic with what they're putting out there.
Yeah. And it part of the deception is allowing it to be such a double-edged sword thing.
Yeah.
Because he wants to make it so hard for us to decipher right from wrong. And the best way to do that is by pulling out our heartstrings. It's a lot deeper than that. With that said,
next topic.
hot and heavy.
We handled it.
Yeah.
We handled it. So, next topic on our He Said That, we are going to dive into gender. And we will just start with what statement was made by President Donald Trump in his inaugural address. He said, "As of today, it will be henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female." And when you read that, it is reflective of what we hear in the Bible. It is reflective of Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that is exactly what God intended.
Yeah.
And we are getting back on track with what God intended. Mm-hmm. And that is something to rejoice, y'all. I mean, we're getting back into something that it's like, this to me as a Christian should not be controversial. This should be like, praise Jesus. Like, yes, male and female. That is the way it was designed to be. Everything was designed meticulously for a reason so that we can have children.
With a perfect design in place.
So,
and intention and purpose.
This is how it should be. Mm-hmm. We are back where we should be. Mm-hmm. And it's very exciting.
It's really encouraging.
But the devil is always working to derail God's perfect plan.
Yes.
To derail God's perfect design.
And invert the truth.
Mm-hmm. Lie to us. I mean, it started as early as Eve in the Garden of Eden. The devil lying to Eve. I mean, from the beginning of the time, the devil, sneaky little snake, coming in there, whispering in your ear, telling you something that's not true. And as you start hearing those lies, if you're not geared up, if you're not in the faith, you might believe them.
Yeah. And some of it's sad.
It is sad.
A lot of it is really sad because I like to look at the root of this issue because a lot of people don't take the time to. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that people who suffer from, people who are, I'm going to say victims to the transgender ideology have either experienced extreme trauma in their lives, struggle with identity, have never understood their purpose in life, or maybe are disvalued
Yeah.
by their parents or those around them. They feel misunderstood, or and or well, they have been lied to by the enemy,
Yeah.
and the perversion of today's culture has influenced them.
Yeah, our culture has been pushing this agenda. I mean,
For years now,
for
and
years.
it's been sneaky about it.
Yes.
I would say the last decade is just this like progression of trying to see how far they can go
Yeah.
to infiltrate like our culture and like just common sense. Like,
How far can we push? How much can we get away with? Y'all, the media and the government are one. The government, the CIA,
oh,
the
like
FBI,
these operatives.
they have been working with the media, I mean,
Oh yeah,
since the
oh
50s,
yeah.
the 60s,
These like media psyops
to
infiltrate.
and to push agendas.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
use our TV shows, our movies, our
Our news
music,
sources.
our news. They use that to push whatever they're trying to do. And they have been pushing, I would say it started with the gay agenda and has then progressed into the transgender agenda. And it's honestly so unfortunate because I feel like it really limits you as a Christian as to what you can watch, because once you are like in your faith, there's so many shows I have to turn because I can't. And it's like
But I feel like a lot of people feel that way.
almost everything you turn on though, it's like
It's in
there
your
cannot
face.
be a show without it. And it now has gotten so aggressive, and it's just like it ruins the show for me. It ruins it. Like I have to turn it off because
Oh yeah.
I can't.
There's
And
like we grew up watching like Star Wars. We're like
I did too.
big nerdy kids, but like and like all the OG stuff is great, but like on like the Disney app or Disney Plus, like you know how like they have the whole all the Disney new Disney stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like a couple of the most like recent shows, they like it's just like
In
they
Star Wars
push.
stuff?
Yes, girl.
See, I grew up watching Star Wars. My dad, like everyone in the neighborhood, would come over, and my dad would turn on Star Wars for us. But all the old ones. I haven't gotten into any, or like even looked at any of the new ones.
like like you've seen the Anakin ones though, right? Like the Anakin Skywalker.
Oh yes.
Okay, like the
With
original
Natalie
six.
Portman.
Yeah, the original six.
Yes, I've
Okay.
seen those.
Okay, but not like the newer,
The
like
new once
the
Disney
Force
took over
Awakens and
ones.
stuff like that. Like you
Yes.
haven't seen.
I think
with
I maybe
the...
saw the first new one, and then I was just like, nah.
Okay, yeah. Well, like all these like spin-off shows, they just like it's just in your face, and I don't know. I don't like it.
I'm
But
not comfortable with it.
I'm
I mean,
not
just,
comfortable with it. But I before we kind of really get into this,
Yeah. And that was a side. That was a
side
derail
tangent.
suddenly.
But I wanted to share some Bible verses to that maybe you can share to someone that you may know who struggle, who may not be transgender, but who struggle with their identity and who struggle with being misunderstood, that they are subject to falling into something like this. And it's these are really encouraging verses because it shows us who we are and how beautifully we were made and how perfectly we were made.
Intentionally.
And
we were made.
intentionally we were made. I'm just going to really briefly run through them. I won't try to explain them.
She got some good ones.
But some Bible verses to read off. First, Psalm 139:13-14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in my womb, I knew you. Before you were
Hmm.
born, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet to the nations. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. We are so perfectly and wonderfully made that, like, it makes me really sad for people who struggle with this identity
Hmm.
problem because they don't know how
They
wonderful
don't
they
know.
are.
That's the key. They
Perfect,
don't know.
perfect how they are.
Hmm.
And I think it's evident when you look at people who suffer and who identify as transgender. You're They're not fooling anyone. You look sad
Yeah.
and you look broken. And I don't know why I got emotional about that.
No, because those verses were, I
They're
do,
so
because the
powerful.
verses were so beautiful. And to read that and just hear, like, God
How magnificent.
created every detail of us. I mean, He knows the hairs on our head. It's just,
He knows what we're going to do in our life, even if you don't, even if you were sitting in your room struggling to believe that you're worth something. You are just exactly how you are. And it's just so sad to see that people suffer with this, that they have to go to the extreme of hurting their body and altering what God created them to be.
and in something they can't go back on.
You can't.
It.
But, like, I don't think people pay enough attention to the detransition process. We were talking about it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
earlier, but I follow some accounts of people who have found their identity in Jesus, and praise God that they were able to find that, because they open up, and their testimony is, I was allowed at a young age and encouraged at a young age to buy into this idea that I'm not really who I was born. I'm not, like, they were being fed these delusions.
Yeah.
And some at a very young age, minors being fed this, and it's just,
It's
it's evil at work.
it is. It's so evil. And we were talking about this too. Like, kids, kids are so vulnerable. Kids are developing.
Yeah.
Their brains are developing. Kids will play, and a little girl might be tomboyish. She might like to play sports. It doesn't mean she needs to be a boy.
Yes.
Like a little girl, or well, I was just saying that, but like a little girl might play with his sister's doll. It doesn't mean he needs to be a girl. Like, I mean, kids are
Kids are kids.
kids are kids. Exactly. Kids are kids. And
kids are innocent.
to allow this, it is literally, it is a form of abuse. It is a form of abuse.
Without a doubt.
And you are not only affecting, this is not only affecting this generation, but we are taking away future generations. We are.
Yeah. You're taking, like, part of the transition process is sterilization.
Yeah.
And I don't care what you say, men cannot be pregnant.
No.
Stop believing that lie. I rebuke that in Jesus' name. That is not the truth. It is not in our nature.
Mm-mm.
It is the inversion of the truth, and it is so purely evil to see that being pushed. But the fact that, like, part of the transition process is sterilization,
We're literally
you're losing
future generations.
Yes.
We are losing future generations
And
of humans.
we're called to be fruitful and multiply and have families.
You guys, I'm
Of
spreading the good
God.
word of being fruitful and multiplying. Did I tell you that story?
No.
Oh my goodness. When I was in Arizona like a month ago working.
Oh, you did?
And this guy, he was like looking at some cars and he said, "Oh yeah, we have a I think they had a RAV4." And he was looking over at the Highlander though, which has like 3 rows. And I was talking with him and he was like, "Yeah, we have the RAV4, but we're thinking about having more kids and so we might need a larger car." And I go, "Be fruitful and multiply." And I just like, after he walked away, I was like, did I just say that to this random man? I'm just like, yeah, be fruitful and multiply.
Oh, girl. That's hilarious. But by the way, not everyone is going to have children, and that's okay.
No, yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's not what we're saying.
I was like, yes, yeah, y'all do that.
Yeah, go.
Have more kids.
Go ahead.
Get yourself a Highlander for those babies.
That is hilarious. That's really, I do remember you telling me that.
There are moments where I'm like, what just came over me?
Hey, maybe they needed to hear it.
I needed that encouragement. Have that baby.
So to pick back up, I want to encourage people to understand that your identity is in Jesus, and not in your own understanding of who you are, or what the devil may try to convince you
Right.
of yourself.
And there is one truth.
There is one truth, and it is the Word of God,
Yep.
and it is God.
There is not.
You don't
get to live your truth.
Yeah.
There is not.
There's no your truth. There's no my truth. There is the truth.
Yep.
The truth. And I believe that the only transformation or the only change that we as human beings should go through or encounter is being renewed in Jesus Christ, letting our old selves die and begin again as new creation.
I love that. I love that idea. That is the only transition, the only transformation
that we should ever go through.
Is a transformation of our hearts.
Of our hearts and our minds and of our souls. Not our biological selves. Any aspect that we don't like of ourselves. God created us perfectly, and the enemy will invert that truth.
The enemy is a liar.
The enemy is a liar. Don't listen to him. Mm-mm. You are perfect the way you are. Yes, we can do things to improve our health and improve our mind and stuff like that, but like, you as a man were created that way with purpose and intent. You as a woman were created that way with purpose and intent, and
a very distinct purpose too. Like,
yeah,
like we're talking about people having children. It's like God designed male and female to go together, to work together. One, for the biological reason of reproducing. Two, we are designed differently. We are designed to do different things. When we talk about equality and feminism, and maybe we'll do an episode on that, it's like, we can be equal but different. We don't need to be equal but the same. Because we weren't designed to be the same. I'm not designed, and I don't just mean me, but definitely I wasn't designed to lift heavy things, okay? Men are...
Child, no, I'm breaking down.
Men were designed differently for a reason. I mean, when you think back to other times, like, women were the gatherers, and men were out hunting and doing like the hard labor because we were simply designed differently.
Yeah, we have different roles in society, and that's okay. Why is that a bad thing?
Right. It doesn't need to be a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Like, the two genders, it's a beautiful thing, actually. I think
it's part of the order that God created.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he created us to have every society has a role to, like, you have a role to play in every society, and there are roles that men are more inclined to hold, and roles that women are more created more to hold. Like, we can't lose sight of that. And there's a beauty in it, you know?
There is. There really
women
is.
have more patience and understanding. Men are more decisive and firm. And
it's a beautiful balance.
It's a balance.
And that's why we were created that way, to complement one another, to have the the perfect combination to to accomplish this life.
And now that's not to say that like women or men will have like will share traits of one or the other. You know, I'm a direct person. Uh, can be have an aggressive side, but like I'm still feminine, and I believe that God created me that way for a specific purpose. Um, Maybe to use my words into my mouth to be firm and spread the truth and stand firm in the truth. But like at the end of the day, we were created each with a purpose.
And with that too, if we start going down this road of you can live your truth and you want to be a boy, you can be a boy. Well, then where do we draw the line here? Because then there are the other things. Oh, you want to be a cat. Well, Alexis liked to walk
Oh
around.
yeah.
Alexis used to like to walk around like a horse, but she's not a horse. She does not live in a barn. She does not eat hay.
Right.
You know,
like thank
she
you,
was
mom
a
and dad, for not encouraging
kid.
that.
Yeah.
I was a
She
kid
was a
with an
kid.
imagination, and guess what? I grew up to have an immense love for animals.
And that's
You know
as
what?
it should be as a kid. Like kids should have an imagination and play and have fun
And be creative.
they should not have any ideas forced on them that they need to be anything other than who they are. And kids don't come up with these ideas on their own because they are kids. We have all been kids. I wasn't a kid thinking I needed to be anything other than I didn't need to you're not having those thoughts naturally.
No.
It is coming to you. There are ways that this message is getting to children.
It's being taught in schools. It's being taught, unfortunately, by parents, which, by the way,
Just disturbing
it's
to me
very disturbing
because that is not loving your child.
it's pushing your own agenda, and maybe I feel like sometimes a lot of parents try to force on their children what they wanted for themselves, and like I really struggle to understand that.
Because you were,
It's child abuse.
yeah, you're like mutilating your child. If your child is wanting this on their own, then
It's your job as a parent to correct them.
right, you correct them. We were talking about that. Like, being a parent is sometimes lovingly giving
Yeah,
correction.
and look, we're not parents, and we can't pretend to understand what it's like to be a parent, but I do understand what the truth is, and I do understand what you were just about to say. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No.
but like, love is correction.
Love is. We aren't parents, but we have parents, and I feel like my mom lovingly
Yes.
corrects me all the time.
Yeah.
And she can drive me crazy, but I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it
because
too, because
that is love.
yeah, and we grow from it. Like,
And steering your child back to the right way. And kids they're kids.
and the truth doesn't have to be harsh.
But like, what even age? I mean, it's like in our 20s when our brains stop developing.
Yeah.
So how can you make a decision like that as a child? You can't go to war till you're 18. You can't drink alcohol till you're 21.
But that's the thing, is these kids aren't the ones making that ultimate decision. It's the parents. And where did we get lost in the fact that like parents don't have a choice when it comes to like this
Right,
this
like-
doctrine being taught in school? Where did we get lost in the fact that like parents don't have the right to speak up and protect their children? Huh? Like, where did we get lost on that?
Right, because if you don't want your child nowadays, if you don't want your child taught these ideologies, then like you have to put them in private school or you have
Or
to homeschool them.
homeschool. I mean, ever since I've had it put on my heart that I want to have a family and have children, unless things drastically change, I'm homeschooling my children.
You cannot trust schools
No.
and
And these
that's a
teachers
sad
who
thing,
like,
who push these agendas, and I'm like,
sorry, who are you?
but I like, where does it, why?
Yeah, what are you trying to
And I guess like you
do?
said, like maybe you're pushing something that it's more of a reflection of something that you have within
That you struggle with.
Um,
It's a
they
perversion.
are encouraging it and like fostering it essentially in schools, and
They're teaching
not even
it.
just transgender, but knowing like in my, I think my school district where I grew up, like litter boxes in bathrooms, which to me is just like, I know, I know. My mom and I were in line at a Christmas carnival in
You're
like my
lying.
home.
You're
No,
lying.
we were in line at a Christmas carnival in my hometown. It's called Dickens, and it's like we go every year. We're in line to go down this like snow tube, and there's a mom in front of us who had like a high schooler and a middle schooler, and they have litter boxes in the bathrooms at the schools for
Furries.
the furries. Like, I'm sorry, what? This should be like a
Guys.
skit or a joke. Like that
Guys,
to me,
come on.
I don't know.
That's a
That's when a parent needs to
that's a
either
mental
correct or that is
illness.
a mental illness. Yes. It's just, it's disturbing to me.
It is
It's
pretty
disturbing. And I
disturbing.
just feel
Yeah,
like,
it is.
you know, I don't know when this total switch was where like all things became acceptable and you can be
Like
whatever you want to
everything's
be.
on the table for
And
you.
like, I guess this must have been right on the brink of when we were like growing up and becoming adults. I guess we got like the last years of just like being allowed to just be a child and like the innocence of a child. And it's like these thoughts should not even be something a child has to think of. And the fact that it's pushed on them or brought to their attention is just, I mean, like, even like sex ed. Like, I mean, that I feel like was even just like, and now these topics are coming up. Like, what?
And
I mean,
encouraged. Like it's like
like,
you used to have a permission. You have to sign a permission form for you to take sex education in school.
well, like, I think, what was it, fifth grade? Like, there's that one day where all the boys go into one place and all the girls go into the other. And I still don't know what the boys learned in there. But I know the girls, like,
They did not learn the same thing we
we
did.
learned about our womanly time.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know what the boys learned. I have no
Who
idea.
knows? I don't know if they learned anything. I love you guys.
It's questionable.
Um,
But like that was like a huge deal. And we were literally learning like basic human biology.
yeah.
But like,
But like
I would hate
it's
to know what those conversations are like now.
it's so sick and twisted. Like I don't know if you've seen these videos, and I hate that they've ever come across like my feeds or algorithm, and they haven't. I think it's more so of like people sharing things or like these videos, like these AI videos of like something morphing into this like horrendous face. Like I don't know, it's like a demonic looking face where it's like the
Ooh.
features are like morphed into just like it kind of looks like Smeagol in a way where it's like these big eyes. I got chills just thinking about that. It's so demonic that like that's what I see when I see this stuff is like just like the nature behind it. It is so evil. And it really does make me sick inside.
Yeah.
Just to like see what's and understand what is behind all of this.
Well, and then you brought it up too before the show. When it is adults transitioning, it is majority men
Men.
transitioning to women. It's perversion. It is, okay, now you can go in a women's restroom, a women's locker room, a women's dressing room.
A woman's prison.
Yeah, playing sports with women.
Yeah.
What is the motive behind that? Perversion.
Yeah.
And I mean, where does that come from? The devil, Satan.
Like sexual predators will do anything and everything that they can to get their hands on their prey.
Well, the whole Target controversy of, men could go in the women's bathroom if they identify as a woman. And that's just, and I think they've stopped that now.
I
But
think so too.
that was just that's like allowing sexual predators near your children
Yeah, and then it's just like it totally takes away from women's rights.
and like safety and
How did we
protection.
stray so far from advocating for women's rights to completely obliterating them? The
I was
whole
gonna say, but
topic.
like they don't even. I don't think you could, like, I don't think they would see it that way as like taking away women's rights. It's rights for transgender, but they don't see it as taking away. And that's like our right to safety and feeling safe and secure.
Secure. Yeah. That's really sad. I mean,
It
at the end
is.
of the day, it all is very sad.
It's sad, and I think it is mental illness, and it is.
It's a not understanding your own worth and who you are
Yeah.
and where your identity comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do understand that, you have joy in your life and you're
You
content with who
do.
you are, you
Yeah.
know?
And because I think this was to be something I'll do every time now, but Mav City Music Lyric of the Week. If he dresses the lilies with beauty and splendor, how much more will he clothe you? And
How much more
will he clothe you? Like, if he takes that much time to put into a flower, um, how much time does he spend on you?
You who was created in his image.
Mm-hmm. So much time. Like, you were so
Yeah.
special. You were so uniquely
Before
made.
you were born, y'all, before you were even thought of, before 2,000 years ago. Like,
He knew every
he knew
detail of
every
you.
detail of every every person that is his creation. He knew all of our plans, what we were going to look like, what traits we were going to take from mom and dad, what we were going to be in life. You
He
know,
knew.
like he knew all of that. And so if you're ever doubting who you are, if you're ever doubting what your purpose is, if you're ever doubting if you're in the right body, you are. You are. You are.
You
In
are.
Jesus' name, you are.
You're perfectly made.
You are wonderfully and perfectly made.
And now into our final segment, our God Wink of the Week. I'll start off with mine.
Yeah.
And mine was literally today, you guys. We told y'all last week about the Luke episodes and the audio, and we are still working to figure those out. We think we might have a solution.
Mm-hmm. In Jesus' name.
We'll be praying for that.
Yeah.
We think we have a solution, but then today I was at work and I was on the computer. I was sitting there. A coworker came by who has become an acquaintance that like we chit chat. We know a little bit about each other's lives, and he was asking what I was up to, and I was like, oh yeah, I've started a podcast and I'm just finishing up some notes. And he said, oh, well, who's editing your podcast? And I was like, oh, well, it's totally DIY. We're working on the third episode.
Yeah.
My co-host has really been handling most of the editing. And he was like, oh, okay, well, if you need any help with that, like, I'm leaving here on Wednesday. And I was like, you're leaving here? And he was like, yeah, Wednesday's my last day. And he's going to start freelance teaching guitar lessons. He has a small child, and so he'll have more time. And he said, I'd be happy to help with the podcast. I studied sound engineering in college. And I'm just going, okay, sound engineering. Well, I was like, well, it's funny you say that because we are actually having these episodes we had with a guest that like we don't know if they're salvageable because we have sound issues. And he asked me the issues and we talked about it for a second. And then I said, well, I'm just so happy for you that you are, getting out of here doing something different, because I see him a lot. And like with being a 24-hour television channel, his position, they have to have someone there at all hours. And so he works really crazy hours and he has a small child. And so I'm like, I'm really happy for you that you're getting out of here so that you can, have that opportunity with your child. And he was like, yeah, it's so interesting the way God works, because as soon as I made this decision, doors have started opening. And I was like, we've never talked about God. We've never talked about faith. I hadn't told him it was a Christian-based podcast. So I was like, oh my goodness, the fact that you just said that, I didn't know if you were a Christian, and I haven't told you yet, but it's a Christian-based podcast. And so that was my God wink. So I was just like, we crossed paths. It's his last week. I didn't know he was a Christian. He might be an answer to some of our prayers.
I'm excited
in regards to those episodes. It was just
and if he's willing to help,
little moments.
amen.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like was holding on to my own understanding of a lot of things, especially in preparation of this episode. I feel like because these topics are like controversial, and I do come from a background of not always walking in faith, and my conservative beliefs were more based off of like common sense and like what I
Than
thought,
biblical.
more than like biblical truths. Um, I totally had a certain outlook on things, and it's really hard to let go of what you believe in and what your own understanding is, and and allowing your heart to posture itself more towards God. Um, and this is it's more of like a God wink of the last few weeks kind of thing. And I just feel like God has really, really worked on my heart and softened me up a little bit to allow me to understand His true intention. And I really do want to give glory to Him for that, because um, it's made me a better person, I think. It's made me more compassionate and loving, but even the last few days, I've also learned to have grace for myself and understand that, like, yes, a lot of what I already believed is backed by biblical truths, and so it's okay to stand up for what you believe in and be vocal about it. But maybe change your tone a little bit. I think tone is important, especially if we're trying to reach people who don't agree with us. And so that's my God wink. Just thanking Jesus for moving in my heart and moving in my life these last few weeks in preparation of us starting this podcast and discussing these controversial topics. I'm really glad that He worked when He worked, because it turned out to be the perfect timing.
Yeah, His timing was right on time.
Literally right
He's
on
always
time.
right on
He's
time.
an on time God. Yes, He is.
All right, friends, that wraps up episode 3. We might see you next week. You might see Luke. We don't know yet.
We hope.
But we will be here next week.
Yeah. Either way, you will have an episode, whether it is another solo, whether we are able to get another guest, or if it's the long-awaited Luke episodes.
The Luke episodes.
Yay!
All right, have a wonderful weekend. Bye, guys.
We love you guys. Bye.
Oh my gosh.
Why?